All right, everyone. Welcome back to PALS TV. Next, we're going to be heading down to Gallia County. One of my favorite parts of PALS TV right now is just the educational component of what we've been able to do here and the discussions we've been able to have. And Gallia's just been amazing in what they've been able to give us and walk through a lot of the history of our state, that region in particular, and really just the United States and during the colonial times, how much went on and how it still impacts us here today. And even right now, as we're seeing, you know, a constitution that was signed such a long time is still being upheld and still just as much relevant today as it was back then. So, and that's really what it comes down to with our history. So again, we love our segments from Gallia. Today, we're going to build off of what we talked about last week and just some of that history that's occurred there. And we're fortunate enough to have Brooke and the ghost of Walter Newman join us today and walk us through part of that history. So I hope you all enjoy this segment because I know I will. So live from Gallia County, we have the ghost of Walter Newman, Brooke.
All right, well, welcome to our segment. We're actually here in Tewindewi State Park, which is current modern day Tewindewi State Park, but we're also here with the ghost of Walter Newman. So go ahead and tell us.
I'm the ghost of Walter Newman, and I used to own this property when I was alive, and it looks like that they have made it a state park. You can see Tewindewi State Park there. Tewindewi is native language for where two rivers meet, or sometimes they say the mingling of two waters, and we'll go see those in a little bit. But I just like to come here from time to time to see what's happened to the property that I owned. Off in the distance, you can see a house. That's a house I built. I built it for my wife, Catherine, because I was here at the Battle Point Pleasant, found this to be just a great place. And when I went home to Virginia to see her, I said, let's move out there. And she said, I am not going to move out there in that wilderness unless you build me a mansion. And so I came back and I built this 3-story house for her. And she agreed to come out, and we had just a wonderful time in this area. And I think having built that in 1796 and still today, people come and visit, we accomplished something back there at the end of that century. So
this is the same house? It's
the very same house. They did improvements. You know, everybody has to improve their house from time to time, and they've kept it up. But it's
same structure.
Still what I did. You can't really tell maybe, but the logs were hewn out. That means you take an axe and a hatchet and you make a round log into a square board that's pretty thick. And yeah, this is the first hewn house in this area. So a lot of people would come here. They would stay overnight because we had rooms for people to stay in. It was a tavern. People came and drank together and socialized. So we had a lot going on with not only the visitors, but our 9 children that Catherine and I raised in this home.
All right, let's check it out.
All right, so let's go see. Built to the Battle of Pleasant, in which I was involved and did not get hurt or anything. The statue there is of Andrew Lewis, who was the commander of the militia forces that came here to battle the natives here who were coming across the Ohio River and causing problems for new settlers. So we needed to get that taken care of. And you can see he's dressed much like I am today. As that was the way that militiamen dressed, since they just used the clothing that they wore day to day, not necessarily a uniform. So there's some words here on this if we ever get a chance to visit. And one of the names of the natives was known today as Cornstalk, but his Indian name was Kechugwa. And that was Cornstalk, and we'll learn more about him in the future. Might as well go around this way, because I want to show you something that's particular to the Gallia County PALS company, and this is a list of people who were wounded at the battle, and one in particular that I need to find is, I keep saying,
Right here.
Thomas Price, who is an ancestor of David Price, who runs the PALS organization. Is he in anywhere?
Right here's the notes also.
Yeah.
Yep. And actually all of our kids have that middle name. So, well, not all of them, but David Thomas is named after this. He's a descendant of Thomas Price, who was in the battle. And then Romy Thomas has that name
And I
too.
believe, Brooke, it's not true that Thomas Price limped the rest of his life from his wound that he received at the battle.
Yes, and he went on to fight another battle even after this. So didn't let much stop him, which
No.
kind of reminds us of David at PALS, right, guys?
Okay, we go ahead and walk. There's all kind of plaques on this. If you get the chance to come here, a lot of important people were with me at the battle and did great things in their lives. I think you can probably see this pretty well since we're in the shade of the monument. It was not open like this park is now. This was a wooded area, see by the trees that are illustrated here. And you can see the combat was not at a distance, but it was hand to hand.
Yes.
As the Indians used their tomahawks.
Ooh.
And we were using
Looks like some
our
spears.
blades,
Too. Okay.
our daggers to fight. It was hard to shoot and miss the trees to hit somebody, although we did have our muskets with us.
Have you talked about your outfit? Any like what are some things?
Not this particular one.
Okay.
This is a frontiersman's dress, and I would be wearing a hunting frock and a bandana that I would tie around my neck to keep things from going down in my shirt. And of course, we would have long hunting pants. We didn't want to get our legs scuffed up like the colonial soldiers that had the breeches. And then we wore boots instead of the fancy buckle shoes, so that we were prepared to be out in the wilderness where things were.
And we've talked about before, but the hat, like where it's so that you can have
and
your.
So I have my hat folded up on this side so that my musket doesn't hit it.
Right.
If I were to have it not, if I did it on this side, my hat would be falling off and it'd be rubbing against it. So in colonial times, they did carry the muskets on the left side, so that's why this side is bent up. And of course, with the tricorn hat, it's twisted a little bit to the side so that the point doesn't stick out in the way of the weapon.
Pops, do you know Indians fight back?
The Indian spot.
Yeah, they were fierce in their fighting.
And they knew Indians were not.
Down here is a monument that memorializes the area that was called the magazine. And a magazine is a mound of dirt that you put stuff in that you want to keep protected. Now, in an army, what you want to keep protected is gunpowder. It's very important that you can fire it, but it's also very volatile that it could catch fire very easily if it explode. And if you have it all covered over with a mound of dirt, then that absorbs a lot of the shock of the explosion, and not as many people, or hopefully nobody, gets hurt. But this had a special use. If we walk on down there, and it's memorialized by this monument. This is the area of the magazine that we had. Now, we did not fight in this area. We can pan around. This was the area where 1,100 people had their camps and so forth. We were camped here. Now, of course, these houses weren't over there, but we were camped here, and we were backed up against the two rivers. And it makes a lot of sense that we were, because we could watch if anybody was coming from that side and from that riverside without the trees blocking our view. And so we just had the one side that we really had to put sentries on to make sure that the Indians didn't invade our camp. But down here at this magazine is where we didn't expect to, but we had to place the bodies of those soldiers who were killed on October 10, 1774 at the Battle of Point Pleasant. And this is a dedicated site in this park, and I really appreciate the people who have done that as they helped out. And it mentions a lot of the people who were put in this magazine to keep their bodies cool and not let them deteriorate too soon before we took the officers back home to Virginia, where we came from in the Staunton area. And the privates were buried just pretty much where they fell or someplace convenient as we brought them from the wooded area.
Okay.
So this is really kind of a cemetery too for those people that got buried there.
So when you lived here, Walter, was there a magazine, a hump of
Yes.
dirt here?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was left over. It wasn't destroyed, and we used it. We would put food in it.
Okay.
We didn't keep a great store of gunpowder like an army would need. You know, we'd have powder in our pouches that we could hunt with. But
So it's a
as
place to
far as-
preserve things.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we put goods, the salted meat,
Mhm.
and some other things that we could keep for a while, potatoes and the other root vegetables. We would keep that there.
Okay.
So we made use of them.
Yes.
So over here, you can see where the two rivers meet. It did not look at all like this whenever I lived here. The rivers were much more narrow and shallower. But I've heard that they've put some dams across the river to back it up so that they could drive these big ships around and carrying coal and so forth on the rivers.
I'm wondering if we can see where they merge. I think it's really neat that like one river is kind of green or brown, and then the other river is blue.
Well, you can tell the weather, what the weather's been. If the river is brown, you know that up that river they had a rainstorm.
Uh-huh.
And if the other river was more green, like you say, then they didn't have a rainstorm in that direction. You can tell where they're hitting together. Do you see some white caps?
Yes.
See, that's where the Ohio is kind of backed up into the canal a little bit while they're meeting. And that's amplified by the wind we're having.
Yeah. You guys can see where the two rivers meet with those caps along here. And there's almost a different discoloration. So, and PALS Gallia is right over here, over that bridge right there. So
There's Bob Evans.
that's right. There wasn't a Bob Evans here, was there, Walter?
Ours was the only store in town, and we were glad for that. If you don't have competition, then you can make money. Now, I talk about the river not being as big, but still people had to get across from time to time. And in the late 1700s, they didn't want to go across earlier, like in the time of the Battle of Point Pleasant, because that was Indian territory and this was supposed to be settlers' territory. But after that got settled down, they moved over to Gallia County, and we would help people get over there. We ran a ferry across the river when it was up and people couldn't get across because it was a little bit too deep. So we did have that business as well to get people across the river.
You were just an entrepreneur of the area.
Well, you know, in that time you had to do everything for yourself. And there weren't a lot of people that were investing in the area.
And things that people needed.
Yep. And
Yeah.
I had to keep Elizabeth, or Catherine. Had to keep Catherine
happy.
Now, I appreciate this monument that we're coming up to because they put a lot of my friends' names on here, people who I had fought with in the Battle of Point Pleasant. And then there's some I don't know. This is a marker for Revolutionary War soldiers that are buried in Mason County, and that's quite a list. Let's see, it's done.
Last names.
Last name
There's William Arbuckle.
yeah,
Leonard
Leonard
Cooper.
is one of my friends. Well, it's your ancestor, Brooke. And this Newman Gibbs is a famous person. If you study that era, Grouches,
Okay.
land beavers have people that are still living, descendants still living in Point Pleasant.
And you can see where people were captains. They
Yes,
signify that.
if they knew that. Now there's an Andrew Lewis here. This is not Andrew Lewis that was the leader. This is the same thing. Was not the colonel that led us over here. So sometimes you have to be careful about names when you go back into history.
What's this anchor they put here?
Well, an anchor comes from a boat that sunk in this area. Luckily, my ferries didn't sink, but yeah, this was put here because of the misfortune of that boat. There's another view of the mansion. You can see the windows on the bottom floor, and underneath of the roof, we have windows on the second floor, and then the third floor has those windows up there near the top. And that was the attic. And that's where we had our children, the 9 of them, sleep. And we had a pegboard type of a thing that they would climb up. And then when the 9th one went up, we shut the door, so they had to stay up in the bedroom till we wanted them to get out.
I need one of these.
So, yeah, some modern day parents, I've overheard them as they tour, talk about their children getting up too early on a certain day. Well, ours stayed up there till we wanted them to come down. We had them trapped up there.
You kind of see the logs that you're talking about. That's really neat how they have been flattened out or made into a shape that you could use.
This is how wide the log is. That's
Okay.
That's not a common width of a board that you might see
Right.
anymore. And then it's got this holding it together and keeping the draft out. And then they're shaped so that they fit together.
Yeah.
We might as well go this way behind so you get all the way around the
Sure.
house.
What is in the house? Come in the house. What's inside it? Wait, what's in that?
Very early on in American history, the French wanted to claim a lot of North America.
What's in there?
So they placed lead plates at the intersection of the Ohio River and tributaries that came into it. And you probably can't read this very well, not because you can't see it move, but because it's French. And the translation to English is over here. And a man named Celeron came over here and placed these lead plates. They placed one in Marietta where the river comes into the Ohio there. And of course they placed one here when the canal came into the Ohio. That was to claim their property, which would be Ohio and west of there. A lot of these plates are lost, not to be found. This plate that was found here was taken up by the state of Virginia. They have it in their possession in their archives in the state of Virginia. West Virginia is kind of wanting to get this back because it's West Virginia now, but it's in deteriorating condition. So maybe we'd like Virginia to fix it up and then we'll get it back. But anyway, this is one of the few that that remain. So, need to pause here for a minute. But that's another historical fact, and people don't know a whole lot about this, so I wanted to point that out.
Was this the back of the house or the front of the house?
This is the back.
Okay.
People would come to the land,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, we would bring them up and around the front to get them all coming in the same door, so people could sneak in and stuff. Come over here for some other archaeology type.
What's this here? No.
This is an altar that the natives used, and it's called the Panther Stone. And see if you can get in there, see how it's cut.
Yes.
And they could place items on, I'm going to call them the shelves of
Okay.
how the stone was cut. The Catholic Church, uses a lot of candles and so forth. I don't think they probably did. They probably used some things from nature. And this was found.
This is like an Indian altar.
Yes.
Okay.
Indian altar?
Mm-hmm.
What's Indian altar?
Right there. Chief Cornstalk.
I can't live on that.
Okay.
And over here's another monument, and this is to Ketugwa. And if you remember, that's Cornstalk's native name. Cornstalk was the leader of the native forces at the Battle of Point Pleasant. He survived the battle, and as a matter of fact, he was one of the signatories of the Treaty of Camp Charlotte, which made it more firm that the Indians would stay on the Ohio side and the settlers would stay on the Virginia, at that time, West Virginia side.
So this is where Chief Cornstalk's remains are, or this is just
remains are here.
Okay.
Yes. Now here's the story about Cornstalk. When he died, he was buried in this area. We believe it was on the other side of this flood wall here that he was buried. When the town of Point Pleasant was building, when they cleared out for their main street, they found remains of people that were buried in that area, one of which they determined was Cornstalk's body. So they took it up and they moved it to where the present courthouse is sitting. So they reburied him there. Whenever they expanded the courthouse, they found his body again. So they've been very disrespectful to his body. They dug him up, and what they found was some teeth and a couple bones was all that remained as he had deteriorated over the years. So they brought him here, and they put those items in the ground with this monument over there. Hopefully he will not be disturbed again.
There's the Catugwa. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Typically, the second syllable is emphasized in native language. So it's Ketugwa
Okay.
is the better pronunciation of that.
So essentially, he was in the ground once, then he was buried once, and now buried here.
Yes.
Okay. Because the first time, would you say he was
He's
buried?
been buried 3 times.
3 times.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first time, then he's been exhumed twice and reinterred.
It's a good thing they put all this around it. Maybe no one can get to him this time.
Yeah. Now, Cornstalk lived 3 years after the Battle of Point Pleasant. almost exactly 3 years. You can see his death year is given at 1777. He was killed in September of that year. Of course, the Battle of Point Pleasant was in October, so it's almost exactly 3 years. It was on the 10th as well of September, so it was just a month short of being exactly 3 years. And he was murdered at a fort, Fort Randolph, by some people who were very upset that some of the white settlers had been killed. And there was really no proof that natives had done it. There was no proof of who had done it. But they just took things in their own hands and broke in on him as he was in a protective custody type situation and killed him. No one was ever convicted because there were 6 or 7 people all shooting their muskets, so they could not say exactly who shot him. And so there was no, basically, I could say there was no justice done for his murder.
Yeah. So what are you thinking now as you look back, Walter, like at the land? I mean, there's some things that have stayed the same.
Well, there's not as much shade as there used to be since
Okay.
they did away with the trees, but they do have the ground cut. I could never cut grasses as neatly as they've done here. I see those big machines that make noises that they cut grass with anymore, and they seem to get faster and faster year by year as I keep coming back. But it looks all right. The river looks bigger, of course, as we said. I don't know if I want to run a ferry. I think my ferry would end up down the river further than I want it to if I ran somebody across there. And I see these big structures where you get across both rivers there, and they look pretty handy.
Yep, no bridges back then like this.
Also, I don't see any buffalo or elk, which there were plenty here at that time.
Uh-huh.
It's one of the reasons I want to come back, because game was plentiful.
What brought you here? Do you remember
Well, I
that?
came with the fellows that were ordered up by, to come out here and fight the Battle of Point Pleasant by Lord Dunsmore.
So you were here with the guys.
I was here during the battle.
And
yeah.
then you decided you loved this area so much you wanted to come back and build and live here.
Look at this flat land and all these rivers. I mean, you have plenty of water and room to grow gardens. And like I said, you had all the buffalo and the elk, and you could get fur and trade that.
Mm-hmm.
So
would you say you were a
wealthy?
Were you a wealthy man? Because to look at a mansion and 3 floors and I mean, all of those things would seem
well, for that day, it was impressive, and that's why it got tagged with the name the Mansion House,
right?
Because it was such a big and well finished building. And maybe sometime we can take you into the Mansion House and see all the things that we have in there, because Catherine really adorned it nicely, and she kind of had the touch for the nice things.
Yeah, kind of outdid herself, maybe.
Well, I got another friend I'd like to show you.
Sure.
There's a monument to her over here. Maybe we'll get out of the sun for a little bit. I like to be outdoors, but getting in the sun sometimes even a ghost gets a little tired of that. I'll tell you about them right now. This is a frontierswoman, woman, and her name was Anne Bailey, that I knew her as, and people would call her Mad Ann Bailey. And she had her husband, her first husband, was killed here at the Battle of Point Pleasant, and she didn't like it, and she let everybody know, and so much in her sorrow that we were saying she was mad. And so she became known as Mad Ann Bailey.
Like kind of gone mad, like crazy?
Crazy.
Okay.
Crazy in her mournfulness.
Uh-huh.
And so she was, like I say, a frontierswoman, accomplished horse person, had a horse called, what was that horse?
It's been so long.
Yeah. Came from London. I can't remember right now. maybe we can find out. I think it's in this
Okay.
statue that we're going to go see here in a little bit. And anyway, she rode this horse, and whenever she would ride the horse, she would identify herself by this great call, this scream. Very, very loud.
Mm-hmm.
And it kept her safe because the Indians in the area believed that if you killed someone who was crazy,
Mm-hmm.
that craziness would come on you. And so they wouldn't dare kill her as she traveled through the wilderness. And from time to time, supplies were needed. And so they would send her to go get them because they wouldn't kill her. They would kill anyone else,
Mm-hmm.
man or woman.
But they didn't want to catch the crazy.
But they didn't want to become crazy by killing her. So we walk over here, we'll see her monument and a likeness of her. You can see the picture of her. She looks pretty grumpy there. She was married to a Richard Trotter who was killed at the Battle of Point Pleasant. And she did not dress like my Catherine. She dressed in buckskins and rode her horse.
Liverpool.
Liverpool. Yeah. It was London or something.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And made some trips clear from here to Lewisburg, which is quite a ways, as they say, to drive a car. Takes
So
several hours.
why is her name on here, Ann Hennis Trotter Bailey?
Well, she was born Ann Hennis.
Okay.
That's her maiden name.
Mm-hmm.
And then she married the Trotter man who was killed at the Battle of Point Pleasant.
Okay.
And then she married Bailey.
Okay.
That was her last husband, second husband.
Okay.
She was buried. Her children moved to Gallia County. And when she got older, she went and stayed with them. And then when she passed, they buried her in Gallia County. Well, because she has historical ties to this side of the river, she was exhumed from over there and brought over here to be buried.
Now, isn't there like something about her in a canoe? Like,
the canoe thing was with her son and being the first people to get married in Gallia County.
that's right.
Yeah, and again, that's your relative.
In the
that
first
married the Trotter man. Yeah.
Gallia wedding,
Yes,
we have one of Madame Bailey's sons
yes.
is married. Why do I have that it was like in a canoe, like in my mind?
That's how they got across the
But
river.
they didn't get married
They
in the
didn't
canoe?
use by ferry. They traveled across in the river.
Your ferry was probably too expensive,
Well,
Walter.
it could have been, yeah, since they had to go out of the state.
Yeah.
There's also a story about she brought the first pair of geese to this side of the mountains too.
So this is who we blame.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, does anyone have any questions for the ghost of Walter Newman? Anything you guys want to know or see that maybe we didn't get to see today? Do you guys think you'd like to see inside the house maybe next week? Yeah? Yep, thumbs up for that. Okay, yeah, they want to see inside the house. So why don't we plan that for next week? We'll take you on a tour inside and see what your wife, Catherine, did with the place. And we can kind of see where you throw the kids up in there and in the basement, and also in the attic, and then also see the basement, right? So there's a basement floor, main
That's
floor.
where the cooking was done. Was in the basement.
Right. So this will be interesting to kind of see how it was laid out. I'm sure you had help in the house. Did you have like
a little
helpers?
bit, but not as much as you might think.
Okay.
Catherine was a busy lady.
Okay. Well, you had 9 kids. You put them to work too.
When they got old enough, they were helping us.
Okay. All right. Any questions you guys have? Let's see here. Looking to see. If not, we can have Aaron or Jonah come back on and see us out here. So it's not exactly what you thought it would be, but also there's some things that have really remained the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then a lot of things that look different, but not bad and different.
No, I think it's been an improvement.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely a beautiful place for anyone who would be interested in visiting. But even more than that, I want to encourage you to think about in your own communities some places that are outdoors, that are state parks, that are it's beautiful to go and visit, to get a little experience of history, but also just to get yourself out of the house and to enjoy something outdoors that's completely safe to do right now. Keeping your distance, but also supporting your local history and kind of diving back into your own surroundings, because I'm sure there are places near you that are very similar and hold a lot of historic value that maybe you're missing out on seeing or experiencing. And a lot of those places have monuments that really tell the story, so you don't even necessarily have to know that much about the area, but just to stop by and read and see what you might discover. And then there's also Google, right? So later, if there's something you weren't sure about, you can always go back home and take your notes and look things up again. So yeah, we're just so thankful that you took a little trip back in time with the ghost of Walter Newman to visit his home and see what our beautiful Twin Dewey State Park is like here across the river from Gallia County.
It's quite like you down in Gallia County. So Brooke and Walter, thank you. I wish I had an educator like that growing up, where I can truly appreciate the history behind what happened in this country. And
it comes to life in real person, right? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Amazing. So enjoy the rest of your day.
He has another story he wants to tell you, Aaron.
I'd love to hear it. I love these stories.
No, they're all in here.
There's a small monument over here that I like the best, because when I grew up, the space race was on. And the monument talks about Andrew Lewis and his descendants, one of whom was a guy named Ed White. Ed White was an astronaut who was the first person to walk in space, to get out of the space capsule into outer space without being in the space capsule like all the other astronauts had been. So from the Battle Point Pleasant and the leader, Andrew Lewis, his descendants does something great like that. It's really impresses me that came down that far. And that's a small monument over here on the side that I try to point out to people when I tell them about what's here.
I'm glad you pointed that out too, because it's perfect with what happened the past weekend.
Right.
America getting back in space again. So thank you for that. That's fantastic. So very proud of our country and our rich history. It's definitely given us the freedom we have today, although we know a lot of people have sacrificed a lot to get there. So we always remember them in this journey. So and Brooke and Walter did a wonderful job walking us through that history right now. Thanks again. You guys have a great.
Thank you, guys.
All right, everyone. That was our live from Gallia segment. Next, we're going to be heading over to Columbus to enjoy our lunchtime hour with them. So do whatever you need to do. Grab your snacks, grab your lunch, and come back and join us here soon with Professor Phil live from Columbus.